So let's go ahead and keep unscrewing this. In this video, we're going to review what the inside of the Orbit Globe sprinkler valve looks like. So we've unscrewed it. Here's the top, it comes right off. Notice it sits flat and firm on there, so there's no, this is the way that it will set itself and make sure that it's sealed. So we just have to help kind of break that seal a little bit. It won't hurt it, just make sure you're not breaking any other pieces off. We'll go ahead and slide that out. So you notice this is what the inside of that valve looks like. A couple things to be aware of is a lot of times, especially if you're running irrigation or what we call dirty water, so water you can't drink or gray water, sometimes you'll get dirt and rocks and pebbles stuck all around on the inside. So be aware that if your system ever does not turn this off, that's a good place to check, because these were never fully intended for a dirty water, and so you just always want to make sure you're cleaning it out if it's ever getting stuck on before going in and replacing it. Another point to point out here is this is what we would call our diaphragm. So this is just an outer piece. You notice it sat right here. So we'll go ahead and take that off. And then we will go ahead and pull this off. Sometimes with them, if they're brand new, it can be hard. We just want to be careful that we don't rip or break this, because it is rubber. And so we don't want to break anything. So on this area right here, so you've noticed we have a spring that we got, as well as our what we call our diaphragm. This is kind of two main points here. We've got a harder plastic outside, and then we have a rubberized piece here. That part is what kind of helps seal it. So things to be aware of with this diaphragm, and this is an area or a piece that does go out quite a bit, and the reason being is it just gets worn down. And so rather than going and needing to buy a whole new valve, you can actually go buy replacement diaphragms. So things you need to be aware of. So if your system does not turn off, for example, and there's no rocks or debris in here, what you need to do is check around this diaphragm, make sure nothing's broken, ripped, or torn. And if there is, obviously replace it, but let's just say that it's dirty. Maybe it's a couple years old. What I would recommend that you do is go ahead and clean this off first with some water. Get it nice and clean, and then massage. So kind of go around, bend it a little bit, the rubberized area. And the reason why we do that is that will help sometimes make it sort of work again and be able to save you some money, rather than going out and having to buy a new one. Now, when you're looking to put this back together, we want to make sure we put it back the right way, or it won't work. And so the way that we put these globe ones back together, I start with the top. All right, we're going to kind of build it backwards from the way that we took it apart. Next, we're going to take our spring and we're going to put it around this middle piece, and you can notice that there's like a little bit of a lip all the way around. That's where that spring is supposed to sit nicely. So if it's sitting angled or anything, that's not good. So it should slide right into place. Oops. And making sure so it's nice and snug. Next, we're going to make sure we get our diaphragm. Now, if you notice on this diaphragm, there's a little circle here of black. That's where you're going to be setting the spring on when you're putting it together. So kind of hold that nice and tight. You're going to push that in, make sure that's together, and you can kind of help hold that and push it. Okay. Now be aware that because you've broken this seal originally, it's not bad, but because of that, you want to make sure you're holding it tight, or else it can launch itself. Next, we're going to put the plastic ring. Now be aware, see how this side it's open? You've kind of got some open spots. That is the side that goes down. So obviously what we want is we want this nice smooth curved part to sit on this on the diaphragm. So we're going to put that on the outside here. All right, keep holding it. Then what we're going to do is make sure we put this right back on. So you see that the little metal rod here, that's going to go right here in this hole. line that up, push it on. Now, something else to be aware of is the way that these are designed. There's not a specific way that you have to put these back on, so it can kind of sit on wherever you would like. So it doesn't really matter. We just want to make sure it sits nicely. You put the screw part back on. Oops. Obviously you can see that one kind of came loose there. That's all right. There we go. I'm gonna keep that downward pressure. And when you're tightening it, it's best to just hand tighten it. You don't really want to get a sort of a wrench or anything, because that's just gonna add more pressure. We don't want to break it. If it is leaking, you can sometimes get one and just kind of nudge it to help it. But just be aware that we don't want anything there. And sometimes it could just mean that there's a piece of debris in the way of where the diaphragm should be sealing it. So be aware of that and don't worry about it. Or don't go in and start using a lot of force. With the solenoid, if you notice, they're just two black wires. With these are what you would connect to your sprinkler line. So one of them would go to your clock based on, whatever color or number that it is. And the other one's going to connect to your common wire, or the wire that provides the power to turn each of these on. Now, it does not matter which one of these goes to which. They will work either way. Just make sure that one is connected to each of them and not cross-wired or anything. When you're wanting to do that, obviously you can take these nice little pieces off, and that's what's going to expose the wire. And one recommendation, and we'll go into more detail in another video, but make sure that you use sprinkler wire nuts. And the reason why is it's got like a sort of like a Vaseline water deterrent on the insides of them, and that jelly helps make sure that as they're running, and if there's any water that gets in there, that it won't short out the system and protects the wire and allows the current to still run.